Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. I just want everybody out there to know that rewind 30 seconds from this moment of us starting, and Justin was just sitting here, and this is what he said. I'm really, really happy about how my action figure display is looking.
It's looking really good.
He said, it just makes my soul so happy.
Yeah, I was just sitting there staring at it. I got some new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from NECA and a new 2-pack. It's Rat King versus Vernon.
Oh.
And for all the guys that were born in the 80s, they know who that is.
Wait, I just want to say this week a friend of ours did a podcast and talked about you, and he was talking about finding friends who weren't afraid to nerd out and who just had confidence, like would go all the way in whatever they believed in. And I was like, that's funny.
Yeah, that made me very delighted to hear that. Yeah, it's looking beautiful. I think it's probably one of the best action figure lines ever created, actually. The accuracy, the cartoon representation of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon is just unprecedented.
There is a bunch of 40-year-olds across America that are all feeling joy.
You know what's funny is when I get in those groups of guys.
Do you think there's any of our listeners who are action figure collectors?
Yeah, actually there are. There are a couple that have messaged me and been like, hey, I'm in the closet with the action figure thing. I had a friend just the other day. I was like, dude, okay, he's a very, like, if you look at him, looks very suave and stuff. And like, you wouldn't think that he would be down this bunny trail of action figure-ness. I was like, but I know him. And I was like, have you seen Super 7's Thunder Tank for the Thundercats they're coming out with?
Oh
and
my
he's
gosh.
like, it's incredible. And he was like, it's so funny because on my Instagram feed, when I see action figure stuff, there's your name highlighted and you've hit like.
Oh, you are such a nerd.
He's like, it's me and you, man. But he never likes him because he doesn't like his name to be seen.
I wish that everybody allowed themselves to nerd out as much as you do. I mean, it doesn't have to be about cartoons and action figures, but finding something you love and not caring what people think about you.
I think it's a great thing.
Did you ever care? Were you ever like, oh no?
There was a time where I was very much like, I felt like I was almost trying to go in disguise to the toy aisles at Toys R Us. It was in my early 20s when I felt like I was like, I should be past this phase. I did feel a little creepy. Like, what's that guy doing here?
It's
like
an old guy.
Yeah, I made up the stories, but it was 20 some years old. But
did you say you made up stories like I'm here for my like nephew or something?
Well, I would buy stuff and then be like, do you need a gift receipt? I'm like, yeah, my nephew might not like this. Because I felt so insecure about it. And then I was just like, I don't even care. And I started finding random people in those toy aisles. So enough of my my toy addiction. Yeah.
Hey, I just like you.
I like you too.
I'm feeling like for you over here.
Oh, I'm feeling like for you too.
That sounded so creepy.
So dirty. Hey, speaking of creepy and dirty, let's talk about faith today. What a good segue.
Oh, that's horrible. That's the worst.
Yeah, what a worst segue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're talking about we've been talking about faith stuff.
Yeah.
And today we want to talk a little bit about the church and mental health.
Mental health inside the church, those do not go hand in hand oftentimes. Yeah.
Sometimes I want to be out there. There's probably lots of places that there's a really high value for it.
But
I don't know of them. But I'm just kidding. I'm totally kiiding. There's not
a lot that I know that I've participated around, and I know that a lot of people haven't found institutions within the faith community that have a high value for emotional health.
Right. Yeah. And we wanted to kind of talk about the pros and cons and how to have a balanced worldview, because some people make mental health their religion. and self-help their religion. And that also causes some problems. But I wanted to talk specifically about mental health because there is a big stigma, and it depends on the denomination that you go to and the pastor that's directly over you. Like there's so many gems of pastor, like gems of valuable pastors out there who have really good worldviews. So I, in no way, when I'm making broad, general, sweeping statements, I'm in no way discounting those. So I just want to set it up for that.
But generally speaking,
mental health is not something that is very well known about in church
or valued.
And it's one of those things that I wish so badly that to become pastors in whatever denomination you had to be in counseling for like 2 years, and you had to learn about how emotions work and how trauma works and how humanity actually works, because so often we're trying to give answers for people spiritually, and we're triune beings, right? So we have our spirit, we have our soul, we have our body.
Yep.
I don't know why my brain cut out in body. I was like, body. And so we have those three things, and they all affect us. And the church for so long has only concentrated on the spirit. And so then if our soul and our body are not working alongside of that, the answer is pray more, read your Bible more, figure it out more, even down to addictions. I know growing up, like if you had a porn addiction or a sexual addiction or a drug addiction, the answer was just beef up your spirit more.
Yeah. Read your Bible.
Yeah.
Read your Bible. You'll have your answer. You're good.
Yeah.
It's like, how does that practically apply to my life?
Yeah.
I cannot stop masturbating.
Totally. And I can't tell you how many precious people in the
institution
in our I was just going to say Christianity, who come to me who've had a struggle for years, who never knew that there could be legitimate reasons they have that struggle.
Right.
Like, oh, you might not just be wicked and evil and rebellious to your core.
No, they're all wicked and evil and rebellious. You evil sinner.
Yeah, I mean, so many times people will come to me with a struggle, and there's really practical things, all the way from like, I can't tell you how many women have come to me about masturbation, and I'm like, well, have you tracked it with your ovulation cycle? Which is like a funny thing, but that's a very body awareness.
Like, oh geez, I'm just super horny, I'm ovulating.
Yes, my body is telling me I need to make a baby. And then there's so many, like, you know, so many people that we've worked through with porn or eating or marriage stuff. You know, in marriage, a lot of times it's pray more, worship together, which those are great things to do.
Right.
And actually, I find that couples either do one side or the other. They like don't do any of the spiritual stuff, like they don't pray together or worship together ever, or they don't do any of the practical stuff.
Or they don't do anything of any at all. Secret option C.
Just apathy. I just ignore it.
Passivity and apathy.
But so there's this thing of how many people have come to me with addictions where I'm like, oh, it sounds like you're in a lot of pain. It sounds like you need love. It sounds like you actually need to communicate. It sounds like you're feeling powerless and you need to have a voice. Like there's so many, like just mental health wisdom.
Yeah, practical wisdom
that unlocks people's patterns that they've been stuck in. And I can't tell you how much relief from shame people have when they recognize, oh, there might be a legitimate reason why I do this. Oh, and when I figure out why I'm doing it, I can actually get my needs met in a healthy way. It takes loads of pressure off people.
Well, I know for me, when I had someone look at me and say, hey, you have complex PTSD.
Oh.
This is actually the issue. There's ways to emotionally treat that. There's ways to grieve and process that's going to get you healing from that trauma that you're storing in your body and your emotions. It was there was something inside of me that, like you said, the relief. I was like, oh my gosh, it was that simple.
Right.
It was that simple. And when I read that first book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving
by Pete Walker, it's so good.
Yeah. I immediately felt validated in the first couple chapters and was like, I could walk away from this book right now and be done because it's just enough to give me peace and go, oh, I'm not permanently broken. Mm-hmm. There's actually practical advice and wisdom on areas for why I'm acting out. And honestly, I didn't carry a shame in my faith background with the anger explosions or stuff. Like I did early on, but not regards to faith.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, I'm a terrible Christian. I was just like, oh, I feel so horrible about what I've done.
Right.
You know, there was a different reason I had shame inside of that. But when it ultimately came down to everything, if I would have stayed stuck in the cycle of my early faith experience that was like read more, pray more, worship more type thing, I would have forever felt horrible about myself and felt broken and just like I wasn't a good quote unquote Christian.
Yeah. And this is that's one of the bummers is you'd met with pastoral counseling. Yeah. For before multiple times and none of them had the tools. As soon as a counselor who understood trauma started explaining things, even our whole fights changed once we practically understood, oh, you're in freeze.
I'm in freeze.
You literally can't think or do anything. I cannot
talk. My brain is shut down.
Yeah. And it's, so knowledge is power. And one of the things that's fascinating, I remember back in the day where Christians would be like, if you have enough faith, you'll just stop all of your medication.
Oh my God.
Like medicine is the devil. And then there became like a wave of like, hey, actually both. There is miraculous healing and God uses doctors.
Right. There's answers.
There are answers. And so one of the things I think is that the church hasn't explored for the answers that God has outside of just your spirit being the thing that heals it. And I have found that soul care and body care, my body has stored as much trauma as my soul had.
Well, I want to add something to that when you're talking about stored trauma in your body. That's something that I very much experienced, but something that just popped into my head was the idea of, I know that when I ate an improper diet, my physical levels were all off.
Totally.
And then my emotional reactions to everything was off. And you couldn't pray yourself out of just needing a proper amount of sugar and regulated blood sugar.
Totally. Totally. And so I think that there is this where there isn't a value. And I think church is meant to be a thing that helps remind us to feed our spirits.
Yes.
Like it's meant to remind us how important that is. But if we are looking to the church for how to live, then the church needs to be giving us soul care and body care as well so that we can have emotional wholeness.
Yeah. I remember, because there's two sides to this coin that we're having a conversation about today, because we like to veer towards balance.
Yeah.
It's always extremisms of it's only this or it's only that.
Totally.
And it's like, how do we actually have a balanced conversation that meets somewhere inside of the middle of stuff? Now, I know I have had spiritual experiences where my body has viscerally reacted to encounters of truth, heavenly truth, Jesus truth, where there was something someone spoke that wasn't a practical wisdom thing from my mind.
Yeah.
But it was something that they spoke, and I felt the presence of God, the presence of Holy Spirit. I've talked a little bit about Holy Spirit, and we were going to talk a little bit more about that. But I felt something that transcended just normal faith. Like I'm just going through the rules of life, but I'm actually exchanging a relationship with God. Yeah. Where I'm having an encounter with his presence, his spirit, and all of a sudden my body viscerally reacted. Yeah. And I could feel like something almost release from my physical and emotional being that you can't describe or make a lot of sense of with logic, but I saw a shift and a change in my life after I had freedom from that space.
Yeah. And I have seen, for me, I actually learned about, so there's a kind of therapy called somatic experiencing therapy. And there's a lot going on right now in the mental health world about your body keeps the score and how to get trauma out of your body. And I love that that's happening. And I remember, so growing up, in my 20s, I started to have very similar experiences where I would encounter, and I don't know how to explain this. There's waves when just truth or love feel like they hit something so deep inside.
Right. You get a revelatory, like truth.
Or sometimes it's just an experience.
Right.
And literally my body would react in a way of like feeling like a energy surge through my whole body. And it felt like a different kind of energy was filling me and pushing out the old. So
right.
I remember this happening over and over and over again, where I would tangibly feel love or joy or peace, or
and you'd almost feel the expulsion of fear or self-hatred or anxiety or depression. Worry or depression, where there's an exchange. It was emotionally and physically an exchange that wasn't just logicked into.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is it was a spiritual experience that I had, but now understanding psychology, I'm like, oh, I was having somatic releases. I was actually getting trauma out and getting love and healing in, and it was through the avenue of my spirit,
right?
Which is awesome and really cool. And so I often think that God created psychology. Like he created how our brains work and how our emotions work. And the more we understand,
and there's an understanding of it,
the more we understand how we're created, that's not going against the creator.
No.
To understand how he put us together is part of admiring the work that he did.
Absolutely.
And to be able to understand that in a way that we can work with him to become all that we were made to be is not us going outside of him. And in the church, I think there's such a fear of humanism, which is like that we can just do everything on our own. And actually, I don't even know what the definition of humanism is. I should probably look. I just know everybody's afraid of it. I don't know because I'm less afraid of it. But
the expression of the way that people have expressed humanism to you has been one of, oh, humanity is void of God, and we can
do it on our own.
We can do it all on our own. Right. That's the way it's been expressed to you through.
And a lot of people would say psychology can veer into humanism. Like, right, I can fix myself on my own. I can do all of this by myself. Right. And to me, it's never been that. It's been like uncoding a map so that we can come alive and actually connect with God.
Oh, 1,000%. I think there's a scriptural verse that talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it talks about putting on the mind of Christ. And the idea of that, like when we get down to it, there's something about if we understand the life of Jesus, there's truths that he knew. I am the Son of God. I am loved. The Father loves me. The Father's with me. There are these huge truths of his being in his connection with the Father.
Yeah.
And so the idea that we're putting on the mind of Christ, it's the idea of like, what is the higher truth of what Jesus came to bring to us? The idea that we were perfectly and wonderfully created in union with our Father, made to be one with our Creator, and our Creator to be one with us. And what does all the teachings of Jesus actually say to the human condition, and how does that actually transform? How do we get transformed from renewing or changing the way that we think, the way that we believe? How does that actually practically change us? And I think that something there, I refer to it as kingdom truths. When we understand higher kingdom truths based and rooted in unfailing love, when we understand it mentally and we catch it spiritually, where we have an encounter with it, there's a transformation that happens that takes us out of that, emotional and spiritual hell that we are gridlocked inside of, that prison of fear and self-hatred, that prison of depression, that prison of hopelessness, that prison of apathy. Like when we get that higher truth of love inside of us, all of a sudden we get freedom out of those prisons. And so what we're talking about here, I'm just trying to build the bigger picture, is that there is this practical kingdom truth that is like littered throughout psychology and littered throughout emotional health. Like it's all there. And sometimes it lacks a spiritual encounter because people are grabbing kingdom truths that will bring freedom. But there's also the other level, which is a personal one-on-one experience that with that truth that can elevate all the work that we're doing and how we're working so hard and actually bring in an alignment inside of us suddenly. Like I know a lot of people that go, okay, I've studied all this, but why isn't it changing me? Right. Yeah. But then you have an encounter, a spiritual encounter that takes all those truths and makes them revelatory in our being and frees our being up.
But it's fascinating because I agree with what you're saying. Obviously, I think you're so smart. And it goes both ways. Sometimes I encounter truth because of a spiritual encounter.
Right.
And sometimes there's a spiritual truth that I can't get to until I go the like soul route and figure out what's going on in my heart and why is it blocked. And I was thinking when you were talking, and this is why we really think there should be a balance in both sides. Like this is we're meant to be body, soul, spirit. All of those are necessary in becoming whole and integrated. But so I was thinking about, there's several famous pastors right now who preach against counseling.
Yeah.
And
there's one that came out aggressively that I'm thinking about when you said that. Go ahead.
Yes. And it's really, really hard for me because
disheartening.
It is disheartening because one of the things we'll say is that counseling does the same thing that they are preaching about, which was what you're saying, renewing your mind, grabbing a hold of truth. Right. Oftentimes, if we can't get connected to truth, it's because there's pain or trauma or a belief system rooted in a memory or something going on that is tangibly blocking us. And there are some people, and we talked about this before, who are better at disassociating into faith than other people.
Right.
Some people, and I know a lot of the famous, listen, I've been around most of the famous, I'm in a place where I'm around a lot of famous Christians. And I've seen their lives. I know most of the stories. We've also counseled a lot of the people in their worlds.
Yep.
And so we actually get a pretty broad view of what's really going on.
Yep.
And I will tell you this, anybody who preaches against counseling has a mess in their own life.
Oh yeah. And they're a ticking time bomb waiting to go off also. If they haven't created an explosion, they're about to. It's only a matter of time till the meltdown happens.
Yeah. They live where they compartmentalize everything spiritual from everything practical. And there are messes on the practical side because they're not actually dealing with them. And so I remember listening to this one person go after counseling and inner healing. And I was like, but he believes that truth transforms you.
Right.
And all we think is that counseling and inner healing helps you get a hold of the truth that you can't get to on your own.
Yep.
It's the thing that is helping unlock you to be able to grab that truth. And so I actually don't fundamentally disagree that changing our belief systems to understand how loved we are, how chosen we are, how wanted we are, like the more we understand who we are, then it does transform our lives.
It's true.
But it's not as simple. Like I remember, I've told this story so many times, but how I always thought I want to die when I was growing up. And I had this crazy encounter with God, with feeling this like life energy fill my body up and crying out all of the pain and the despair that I'd been locked in. And it felt like this incredible encounter with God. And then I came back and still wanted to kill myself. And I remember this hopelessness, like, wait, that was supposed to work. And growing up in church, you hear all these stories of somebody gets prayed for once and they never struggle with depression again.
I watched one guy, I actually did a short documentary in college about a guy, he walked into a church, complete heroin addict.
Yeah.
His name was Barry. Walked in and had an encounter with the presence of God. He had never had anything like this. Walked in, felt this tangible love. It hit him so hard. It was like an energetic hit that hit him so hard. He flew onto the ground and just started shaking. And it was just a service going on. Like he didn't ascribe even to Christianity or anything. He just came in off the street in Hollywood, and he's shaking on the ground. And then all of a sudden he felt something lift off his mind and off of his heart. And he was like, I didn't want to do heroin ever again. Like he didn't have any, not just relapse, but what is it?
Side effects from the
withdrawal coming off of it.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. So he went for a couple of years there like that.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, there was a huge mess with the pastor where the pastor did some incredibly destructive stuff. Yeah. And what he went back to? He went back to heroin because he didn't actually have the practical tools on how to process pain and grief. And so when the pain of that hit so hard of what he found out was happening, he went back to a drug addiction. And so we see the power of actually the encounters that you're talking about. And then when we're lacking the practical, what could actually happen.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. I had this amazing encounter with power, and I've seen so many. I know a girl who actually encountered God and got set free from PTSD. I've heard so many, and there's stories of people who were suicidal their whole life and instantly that changed. In one moment, depressed their whole life and instantly that changed. And you have, like, if we're gonna, like, for me personally, if I'm gonna believe in a God, I want to believe in a God who's powerful and involved.
Yes.
And so that idea that at any given moment he can show up and everything can change is beautiful to me. But it can become weaponized and make people feel shame if that's not what they experience.
Totally.
And you can feel like, why did it not happen to me? And I remember my mom just praying all of the time to not be addicted to drugs, but not ever doing anything about it. Like just praying for that miraculous moment where all of the desire would go away so that she could and I actually believe in pray for whatever you're going on. I'm not against her praying.
Right.
I'm saying if she could have partnered that with some practical things.
And there's something about the idea that God helps those that help themselves. And what I mean by that is an engagement of, like, when I choose to engage and actually practically step up, I'm making room to partner and participate here on earth with the potential of God's power.
I love what you said, but I hate that statement.
I do hate that statement because of
it brings up so much for people.
Sure, I get it, but that statement, when in context of how I broke
You're
that
more
down,
saying, like, God loves co-partnering with us.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Co-laboring with us.
Yes, and so for me, if I will not participate, God can't really help me if I'm like, oh God,
He can help us.
He can.
There's no boxes for God. He can do whatever he wants.
You and I are definitely at an impasse of conversation right now on it. But what I'm trying to say is, if I just want to sit and pray my whole life and just sit and do nothing and not participate, that's what I'll get.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. A lot of people will just be like, well, I just prayed and I didn't participate.
Right.
And there has to be a participation because humanity was made in a way where there's co-creative power. And that's what I'm talking about in it.
Yeah. Humans have free will, and it's so important to God to honor that. And so I think that just going back to my story, I actually agreed with everything you were saying. I just hate the God helps those who help themselves. The connotation and the emotional memories I have with that statement.
Right. You're saying you have a trigger.
I have a trigger
in your history with that.
Yeah. Right. The statement makes me feel like I'm alone and I have to do it on my own.
Right.
And that he won't intervene on my behalf.
Right.
And even what I'm saying, like, there's so many times where I've had to face something that I've like me and my best friend will talk about this. We'll pray, like, let's say you have to change your diet completely. We'll pray, like, give me the grace to want to do that. Like, so we're not pooping on anybody's prayers. We're just wanting to say that the spiritual plus the emotional health world together can create a lot of momentum.
A very powerful partnership.
A synergy.
Yeah.
So for me, I got back and I asked my pastor and I was like, hey, I had this great experience about suicide, but it didn't change anything. I still want to kill myself. And thank goodness he had a value for this. He was like, oh, you need to actually change your mind habits now. Your mind there might be the spiritual component might have transformed during that encounter, but the mental component and scientifically we have ruts in our brain. When we think something over and over and over again, our brain subconsciously does that. And the beautiful thing is we can transform our mind. Literally, the Bible works. You can transform your mind. And the more you think new thoughts, the more your brain actually transforms around that, which is really powerful. And so I went on the journey. It took me 4 years of transforming the way that I thought and no longer going to that for comfort and saying no to it and not agreeing with that. And I just remember I would have been so hopeless. And I've seen so many Christians get hopeless because they thought an answer would come a certain way.
Yeah.
They thought deliverance would come like in one instant, or they thought they had this one encounter. Now everything should be fine. You know, like I can't tell you how many times we've seen marriage couples who go to a retreat and they feel like this incredible breakthrough. But if they don't get tools to walk it out practically and they go home, it may or may not. Now, I also know people who've had a radical encounter with love and they never go back.
Right.
It just changes them forever.
Right.
So I guess what we're saying is God does things differently all the time.
Right. I think that I still think even when those people who are radically changed forever in those encounters still have practical aspects of life
that they can learn,
and they need to actually walk out.
Yeah.
And so again, I think that's a co-creative partnership that's there. And again, I've had some radical spiritual type of encounters that were pivot points. And I've had dozens of pivot points where I'm like, oh, that I didn't know how to get over that hurdle in any practical sense of it, but I heard something from God or I had an experience with God that ended up freeing me. Yes. And I could feel that all of a sudden I had the capacity to do things that I couldn't before. And I think so there's two parts. I think there's, obviously we're talking to two people groups. There's a people group that has never had spiritual encounters that we're saying, hey, it's time to actually pull on a real relationship with your creator and begin to go, Papa, I want to know what it looks like to have spiritual encounters that transcend my normal logic.
Yeah.
And then there are some people on the other side that have had those heavy spiritual encounters and they're still spinning their wheels and they're probably hopeless about it.
Yeah.
And instead of becoming embittered towards God, going, okay, Papa, I want to learn how to practically implement kingdom values into my process while having the gift of these spiritual encounters.
An interesting one here, and it's such a balance and it's so hard. I was thinking about a lot of single people that I know who are just like, well, I'm just praying to meet someone, but they're not proactively doing anything towards marriage. So they're not looking at, are there fears I have towards marriage where I'm like shut down? How do I relate with the opposite sex? Do I feel comfortable relating to the opposite sex? Can I be me relating to the opposite sex? What are the things that I actually need to do in order to engage?
What are the barriers internally?
Right. And so I've seen this thing or there's the people that are like, I'm doing it all on my own and I'm not including God in it. And so again, just mirroring what you're saying, that concept of we can't just give answers that are like, just pray about it. And we can't just give answers that are like, figure it out on your own.
Yeah. We're
meant to be beings that have all of these pieces that are being integrated together.
I thought about this ran through my mind that one of the superstar pastors you were talking about that was against counseling and everything. One of the things that I saw him talk about is like, my past is under the blood. That's pre-Jesus and it's gone and I'm done with that and that's buried. What he's really dialoguing out loud about is compartmentalization. Yeah. So he's actually saying, I learned how to dissociate from my history because Jesus encountered my life and that should just be done and I'm fine. So there could be 30 years of his life that he took and wrapped up and put into a garbage can and put a lock on top of it and said, I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to feel that. I'm just going to go believe these truths over here, which is fine. And it works for a certain amount of time when you have the capacity to keep the garbage can lid locked down tightly. But then all of a sudden there starts becoming the tricklings. the tricklings of behavior that you don't understand why you were aggressive towards someone, or why all of a sudden some desire for an addiction popped up and you begin to spiritualize it and be like, oh, I just need to pray more. Oh, that might be, that might be an attack from the enemy. I heard that in my culture, which was
all the time.
The enemy's trying to attack you. No, you have an effing childhood that you haven't gone and looked at, and that part of your soul isn't getting that actual comfort, healthy comfort needs met, and you're just trying to pack it away, and it's screaming and it's starting to explode out of that garbage can, and you're about to have an affair or go into a big drug addiction or something, and it's going to be a huge controversy, all because you wouldn't go visit it with the arms of love. And when I say the arms of love, that foofy language is like, I'm going to go there with this unfailing love that is Jesus, my Father, Holy Spirit. I'm going to go into those places with kindness and patience and care. I'm going to take a review of my history. I'm going to go be compassionate on my past and give what was needed for any human being, which is that kindness, gentleness, patience, long-suffering, understanding. I'm going to go visit all those times in my life where I can feel aches that I've been running from. I'm going to visit myself when I made destructive decisions in my past. I'm going to review those moments and begin to go, how can I love myself and see my history through the lens of understanding? Like, how can I understand myself better and why I did what I did?
Well, and one of the things I've heard you talk about so much, which I love, is you're like, the power of the gospel, if it can't go back to your past,
right,
before you met Jesus, then it's not very potent.
No.
And so when people are like, that's all under the blood, I'm not going to look at any of that. That means they aren't allowing the love of God back into those moments to get free from the shame, to understand themselves. And so much of the time we have shame when we don't understand why we did what we did. And when so let's say you were a womanizer before you met God, but now it's under the blood, so you never look at it. Well, then you never notice the pain that you had where you needed to get comfort, where you needed to get connection, where you felt powerless to do it in another way. And so then if you don't recognize that need, then you won't recognize that need when it pops up again, where you could get that met in a healthy way instead of an unhealthy way. And so refusing to look at things really cuts out our ability to heal and transform and understand ourselves.
Right. And I want to reflect on what you used, like the womanizer concept, because I want to break this down even a little bit better. So if I'm willing to go back into my past and look at my season of womanizing, if that's what I did, and I go, okay, what was going on for me that I wanted to take from women like that? Oh, I had a lot of pain from my mom. I felt really abused or abandoned by mom, or whatever the concept was. And I go, oh, I understand. I've hated myself for womanizing people. I've had so much shame about that. But I understand that the effects of that type of abuse or that type of neglect or abandonment would cause me to be at war with women. Oh my gosh, it doesn't mean what I did was right, how I womanized women. But what I understand is that was a little boy who was in a lot of pain. And now I can actually lend forgiveness to him. And I can begin to go, I forgive you. I see why you did what you did. I know you hurt people in the process, and I know you were hurting. Yeah. I can forgive you and give you permission to feel forgiven. So there's parts of our soul that are trapped in feeling unforgiven. But when we forgive that part of ourselves and understand that part of yourself, now you have the freedom through the forgiveness. And like you said, you can come forward and go, all right, if I feel the desire to womanize, is it because there's still pain with my mom that hasn't dealt with? What did I really need? Oh, I needed a mom that was involved. She neglected me. I need compassionate love. How do I get that in ways that isn't me sexually taking from another woman? Yeah.
Well, and another thing too is even like if you can go back to those moments of womanizing and allow God's love into those moments and process those moments with people and allow people to see the things that you felt were unlovable so that it begins to take the power out of the past.
Because when you bring up the truth of our past and we go, here's the actions of what I did back then, and you share it with someone, it breaks, it's that light shining on the darkness. This is a place that I felt dark about. I bring truth or exposure to it. Yeah. And someone looks at me and goes, but I still love you. I forgive you. I don't think you're a horrible person. all of a sudden there's a freedom that happens from the shame just because of the exposure of that.
And I just don't think there was ever a part where God wanted us to disassociate. You have to disassociate if you take any chunk of your life.
Right.
If you take any chunk of your life and say like, that isn't a part of me anymore. I mean, you can say things like, oh, I'm not a womanizer anymore.
Yeah, those actions aren't who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can say like, that actually wasn't who I was back then when I was doing the behavior. But anytime we're just like, well, I'm just like, all of that is not me, then we're actively disassociating, and God actually wants us whole.
Yeah.
His desire for us is to be fully loved by him.
Yeah.
That there wouldn't be one area of our life that isn't loved and held and known by him.
Yeah.
And so the concept is that I've watched so many people elevate spirituality, and to do it, they have demonized mental health.
Yeah.
And I've watched it crush people. Yeah. I think about even like you. So you had rage, and if people would have told you just needed a demon deliverance the whole time, you would have felt horrible all the time.
Right.
And no matter how many times you got prayer or whatever, if it didn't stop, you would feel like there was something really broken and horrible, when all you needed was to actually understand why you were doing what you're doing and what was going on in your body, what was tangibly taking over. Even like for people with addiction, it's helpful for them to actually understand addictions and addiction cycles. And it's helpful for them to understand why they do what they do. And it's really powerful to bring all of that to God. One
of the things that I want to add that creates these climates inside of the institutions is that a lot of leaders or pastors, leaders inside of those spaces, they believe the lie that they have to have all the answers.
Yes.
Right.
Babe, this is so good.
So they create this self-imposed or institutionally imposed pressure to be the answer for everything. I should be able to fix
everything. That's my job.
That's my job. I'm the leader. I'm supposed to fix everything. So when they find themselves at a roadblock inside of someone's life that's doing something, and they feel overwhelmed because they don't even know their own emotions.
Yeah.
And they feel responsible in this moment to give an answer. What they do is they find the quickest solution that gets the spotlight off them.
Totally.
You just need to pray more.
Yeah.
You just need to read the Bible more. You just need to worship more. Like those classic Christian answers. Because now, if you can pass the blame of, oh, you're just not being spiritual enough onto someone else, then you don't feel like a failure personally. Now, if you didn't have performance issues as a pastor and you didn't believe the lie that it's your responsibility to fix people,
that you should know everything about every situation.
And if you believe that it was only your job to figure out how to love well, you could be present in the midst of other people's messes and be like, I don't know all the answers. This text that is the Bible is still a mystery to me. I don't know how the spiritual end of stuff interacts with like human stuff. I am exploring it right now, and I am in discovery. But it's like,
or they could be like, I don't know what's happening here. Let's pull in some resources for people who have more experience. And how should pastors know everything about finances, relationships, marriage,
and they're preaching on every bit of it, and then what they feel like is a fraud.
Totally.
And I've met with a lot of high level pastors who have big churches and they've built all these things up, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, but I feel like a complete fraud.
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking on things that
I don't know about.
I don't know anything about, and it doesn't align with my life, and it's all theoretical. And I'm destroying people, and I can see marriages falling apart because of how I've counseled people.
Totally.
Which again, if you're one of those people, you're not bad for it. It's actually an invitation to humility to say like, I've made messes thinking I had to know everything, and I'm going to release the pressure off of me, and I'm going to start leading from a place of I'm as messy as you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and here's the other thing. Pastors are literally set up. It should be mandatory for pastors to have mental health all through seminary.
Oh, totally.
Because most of the time, their big coping mechanisms from their childhoods come out through religious performance.
And that's an easy thing and a justifiable addiction.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it looks really good.
You can justify religious piety and be like, I'm just, like, look at how good I am. I'm over here doing this. And I'm like, you are literally no different than anyone at an AA meeting right now. Don't try and elevate yourself in it.
So it'd be awesome if people had to do, and also it's humility. A pastor, senior counselor is admitting, I shouldn't be able to know everything. I shouldn't be able to do everything. I should have needs. And then just the nature of pastoring, which is you're getting hurt all the time. You're getting abandoned all the time. You're getting criticized all the time. Oh my gosh,
the pain just in that role.
Yeah.
Forget your own childhood history.
You're getting blamed for everybody's past mom and dad and everybody's past pastors. And like you're taking hit after hit after hit.
Absolutely.
And it's going to hit your triggers from your childhood.
Absolutely.
It's going to hit your pain from your childhood. And that's when pastors get controlling or manipulative or like, because they're just protecting themselves.
Oh, they're big, giant, fortified cities.
Yeah. They're just, and this is why a lot of churches get really unhealthy because the pastors often grow up in crazy families. They want to help people. And part of us wanting to help people, I include myself in this, is we want to fix the people in our family. Like we're set wanting to redo our childhoods and trying to hold people together. But that also means we have a lot of triggers and a lot of edges. And so if I'm not getting help to learn that and understand that, I will take it out on the people around me and I will demand that they be able to do what I can do.
Yeah. And
a lot of pastors will say they grew up in a good family and they have no issues because pastors are the kings and queens of denial.
And a lot of them are like second or third generation pastors or things like that. So their house was perfect. It was a perfect Christian household, which means it was they were living in golden chains. Yeah.
I mean, there's just pain in every family.
Everything looked perfect, yet, which is even more trapping.
Yeah. And there's pain in every family. And there's a thing, even if pastors didn't go through pain growing up, just the role of pastoring would be painful enough for them to need to see a counselor to process it well.
My friend grew up in his household. His dad happened to be a pastor and a counselor. And yet his dad didn't know how to connect personally, emotionally with his son. And his son went on to do a lot of crazy things and live a very broken and disconnected life. And, even in the home, there was no violence, none of that. But his dad was pulled a million ways with other people. He felt very neglected. He didn't know how to they didn't know how to have those conversations. There wasn't the patience and the kindness and the compassion that oftentimes. And so again, it would be easy to be like, well, my family was fine.
Right.
But no, actually your family was in constant pain at some level that you just wouldn't acknowledge. And here's kind of where we're getting at, even with us. Right here in this space. A week ago, we're sitting in counseling with our therapist for our marriage. We're having meltdown, sob crying.
Totally.
About avenues of all the craziness early on in marriage. And we teach on emotional health.
Totally.
We did not arrive.
No.
We are in a journey with each and every one of you. Yes. And this is an invitation, as a side note, this conversation is an invitation to those people out there who are in leadership. Who have been trying to skate by and just be this thing for people and survive and go, you can let down your guards. You don't have to be everything. You don't have to be the solutions. You can come be messy and acknowledge, I'm just messy and I'm with you in this. I'm just vocalizing everything going on inside of you guys as the person at the front.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I trust a pastor who knows that they need help.
Yes.
And who gets it.
I trust a leader, any leader.
Yeah. Because it's humility.
Yeah.
And it's realistic for humans. Humans need outside input. Humans were not meant to be islands. We're meant to live in community. We're meant to get help when we need help.
Yeah.
And if you're a pastor out there or you have a pastor out there, like I think one of the best ways you can love your pastor is put a fund for them to see a counselor.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that would be a great thing in every organization where there's funds specifically for that.
Yeah. But the reason I'm bringing up that is because if your pastor doesn't see their need for help and isn't okay with receiving it, then they're not going to be giving you input.
Absolutely.
Where that's like the trickle down effect.
Absolutely.
And there's so many things. This is why we've tried to create the resources that we have, which is we've tried to blend the spiritual and the soul issues to help empower people to get out. And we've focused a lot actually more on soul stuff than spiritual stuff because there's a lot of environments that can really hit the spiritual.
Yeah. I do want to have this on the note of the spiritual stuff. I believe so much in the miraculous, and the miraculous again can be made manifest through practical aspects, but there's something about the spiritual miraculous that is so incredible. There are some people out there that have never had an encounter with the miraculous spiritual aspects of God. And if we're close to wrapping this up, I want to be able to pray for them.
Yeah, go ahead
with that. So for those of you who haven't had almost a spiritual miraculous encounter, we're just going to take a moment here for you, and you can just chill and listen, and you can bail on the rest of the podcast, or you can just be very intrigued.
Well, before you bail, this year I decided to just ask people if they wanted to do Living Fully Alive if we did a second sign up. We asked on the last podcast, and I've been getting a ton of emails of people who would like to do it if we do a second round. I've been thinking about doing a second round because the world's so crazy right now and so hectic, and we're having such radical transformation happen in our group this year. The immersion program has literally changed the game. And so if you are interested in, if you would want to do Living Fully Alive, if we started a second round this year, if you just want to email me, LFA, which stands for Living Fully Alive, LFA@stumballconsulting.com. We also have a course called The Compassion Project, which really goes through helping people understand why they do what they do. Literally what we've been talking about of helping people understand their past, understand the needs they had, understand why they were doing and how to proactively get compassion to their past. I feel really proud of that course. And we have the Father series, which is tangibly working through our issues with our fathers that affects how we see God, and working through our issues with God that affect our relationship with our fathers. And so our whole life is meant to be bringing the balance of these two. So I just wanted to let people know about those options. You can find everything at justinandabby.com.
Awesome. So for those of you who want an encounter with the miraculous, Papa, I know that it's your desire to awaken the hearts of your kids, the entire world. You want to come in and awaken us from the places where we're so asleep. We're asleep and slumbering to love. We're just living mundane and normal lives. Dad, you came and shattered my normal a long time ago. You came with a type of love and a type of experience that felt tangible to my mind, to my heart, to my spirit. You awakened something inside of me that was beyond logic. God, I thank you so much for shattering our logical experiences and transcending them into the spiritual, miraculous experiences, God. I thank you that they go hand in hand, but I thank you that there's something that goes so beyond our normal humanity. Right now, God, for every person who's been desiring to have an experience, I ask right now that as they're listening to my voice, something would overtake their mind, their body, their spirit, and they would begin to feel an unfailing love that transcends their normal life experiences. God, that you'd begin to encounter their body, that they would feel something in their body, that their body would begin to go, oh, I never had any physical feeling like this ever before in my body. Holy Spirit, that you'd become a real experience, a tangible experience for everyone that's listening right now. That again, people would come back from listening to this and go, I don't know how to explain what happened. Something crazy happened. It wasn't just normal life. Break and wreck the normal, God. that people would begin to be able to hear you differently, that they would begin to go, oh, when stuff felt so dim and I almost felt deaf to things, all of a sudden it's like I'm on a different frequency. I can hear God in a way that I can't even explain with my human language, but I know that he's with me, that he loves me, and he's making things happen all around me. God, like in my early 20s, when you started to awaken me to experiences that almost felt crazy. Like if I tell people about this, they would think I'm crazy. God, begin to give them those loving experiences. Would you begin to lead people into relationships with other people who are alive to that, who are alive to the spiritual aspect, alive to the miraculous aspect, God, and to people who have been hurt, where they've had miracles in their life and then they had experiences that didn't pan out, and then they became disappointed and they became bitter and they became resentful and they threw everything out. God, would you begin to heal people's hearts and their minds of those past experiences, that they could give it another try, that all of a sudden they would open up internally and say, I'm ready. I'm ready for again. I'm ready to give it another shot. Here's my disappointment. Here's my pain. Here's the places that I don't have language for what did happen and why I'm sad. But God, here's my sadness. God, I welcome healing, tangible, mental, emotional healing that transcends our practical abilities, that taps into heaven. And God, and lead people also to healing that's practical, that they haven't been able to touch yet inside of their lives.
We just invite the power and presence of unconditional love and the power of truth to come and encounter every body where depression, fear, anxiety, self-esteem issues, where lies and accusation, where fear and shame have taken up space. We invite the power of unconditional love to grip people's bodies, that love would come and push out the heaviness and the ache of the pain that they've been carrying, and that all of a sudden love and life would flow into their body, that they'd feel peace that passes all of their logic, that passes all of their understanding, that there would be a presence of goodness, of your kindness, God, of a love that says, I choose you and I want you, that there'd all of a sudden be, that you'd release your wanting over each person listening, that they would feel like, oh my gosh, the creator of the world loves me and likes me and wants to be near me and wants to be close to me. And we ask for your truth that would come and push out all of the fear and all of the lies. And for any of you out there who've been a part of churches where you didn't feel seen and heard when you had emotional issues, or you had addictions, or you had things you're trying to overcome, and you felt like you just got told, just try harder. I'm so sorry on behalf of pastors that told you to try harder, that told you need to perform more, that told you that you could figure it out on your own. I'm so sorry on behalf of every pastor who didn't know what they were doing, who didn't know what to say. And so they actually put it on you instead of going on the journey along with you. I just repent to every person out there who needed love, who needed understanding, who needed to be heard, who needed compassion, who needed to feel like there was hope where you didn't understand how to do and be what your pastor was saying. We just break the performance and the shame that got placed on you off of you. Every place where there's been burdens that got put on you, that if you could figure it out, if you had more faith, if you did everything right, then your life would be different. We just release you from the shame of feeling like there's something wrong with you because you're still struggling with something. We release you from the performance that said you should have already figured this out. How come you're not done yet? And I just break off that there's this beautiful gift of being in an environment where breakthrough is possible, but it can actually become a burden if you haven't experienced it. If you're not to the other side of something, you can actually feel like, what's wrong with me? And I just break the shame off of every person who's still working through something, that's still walking something out, that's still going through something. And I give you permission to be human and to explore your soul and your body and your spirit. And we just break off that spiritual oppression that says that if you were perfect, you'd be past past this already.
Yep.
We invite you, God, to come with your love. That you would liberate your kids. That you'd bring them the tools, the books that they need, if they need a book. The practical they need if they need practical. The spiritual they need if they need spiritual. Would you come and balance?
Yeah.
What if they need to practically do something for their body? God, would you bring pieces in front of them?
Yes, God.
Did you have more?
Nope.
Amen.
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 That's what they'll say. Amen.
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 I did bring up, the reason I brought up living fully alive is because we address this in this. We talk about your relationship with God, your relationship with your heart, your soul, your spirit, and so much of the course is built on weaving those two things together. So that's why I brought it up before. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That was a good day. Now to go look at my action figures.
You probably actually will.
All right. We had fun.
Share this if you want.
Yeah. Rate, review, subscribe, and share.
Yeah.
All right. Bye now.